Weeknights at 8 on Television 5.
This is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather.
Good evening. Drama underground tonight in the Rocky Mountains of western Colorado. In a coal mine near Redstone, a one-street town 30 miles west of Aspen, time and air are running out for 15 men trapped by an explosion and cave-in. Barry Peterson is there.
Throughout the day, a half-dozen rescue teams inched deeper and closer to the 15 men trapped a mile and a half down the shaft of Dutch Creek Mine number 1. The rescue effort was slowed because yesterday's explosion and fire tore out the ventilation system, creating a black nightmare of fire and toxic gases. So rescuers had to build a temporary ventilation system each step of the way. 4 miners were hospitalized, men who had been working nearly a mile down. One, his burned face covered with medicating cream, remembered the ordeal.
I remember it was very hot, and it was hard to breathe because of all the dust. Fortunately, I had my back to the wind so that I didn't inhale a lot of really hot air, scorch my lungs or anything.
Company officials were guarded about the fate of the missing men.
Well, we have large problems.
What are the chances that those men can walk out alive? Is there a chance of that?
I'd say there's a chance, yes, or at least for some of them. They're working in 2 sections.
Maybe, Delaney explained, the explosion damaged one section but might have spared the men in the other. At this point, no one knows. Dutch Creek number 1 has been the scene of tragedy before. In December 1965, a methane gas explosion ripped through the shaft, killing 9 men. Company officials say it was human error. The miners had allowed coal to pile up and block ventilation.
But they have not yet been able to reach the trapped miners. There are, they estimate, perhaps within 1,000 feet.
So there were grim faces on the miners who gathered at the main gate. Men who comforted the families waiting for word. Men unwilling to lose hope.
All you can do is pray. We don't know. That's the bad thing about it. Just, you know, the kind of conditions it's in, and all you can do is hope for the best.
This mine, like most in the West, is not covered by a United Mine Workers contract. The mine was operating despite the coal strike in the east. The first rescue teams could reach the trapped men later tonight. And when the rescue effort is over, federal investigators can begin in earnest to find out what caused Dutch Creek number 1 to blow. Barry Peterson, CBS News, Redstone, Colorado.
You're looking at Super Paint, the best paint Sherwin-Williams has ever made. It's so chemically superior to ordinary paint that when you use it, we guarantee you won't have to paint again for 10 full years. And we know how you feel about painting. Super Paint. It's available in interior and exterior. But it's available only at a Sherwin-Williams store.
We're comparing Chris's cereal with Total. 1 ounce of crispy whole wheat Total has 100% of the recommended daily allowance of these 9 vitamins and iron. Chris, how do you think 1 ounce of your Raisin Bran will compare?
Well, Total's really up there, but I think my Raisin Bran will be pretty close.
Let's compare.
Wow, Total's much higher.
Right, 100% of these 9 vitamins and iron.
Well, that's quite a difference.
That's the total difference.
President Reagan's pardon of 2 top former FBI officials, Mark Felt and Edward Miller, has triggered sharp response from the man who prosecuted them. You recall they were convicted of authorizing illegal FBI break-ins. Robert Shackney has details.
In issuing the pardon of Felt and Miller, President Reagan bypassed the normal Justice Department pardon procedure. Among other things, he did not consult either prosecutor or judge, and his staff did not even read the full trial record. That brought sharp criticism today from prosecutor John Niels.
Well, he has the power to issue a pardon, but under our system of justice, political predilection has no place. And under our system of justice, what matters are the facts, the law, and the Constitution. The precedent created by one member of the executive branch pardoning another member of the executive branch for violating the rights of the people threatens the central proposition of American democracy that the executive branch is subject to and not superior to the Constitution.
Although he doesn't like the presidential decision, Neal says he doubts that it will encourage any future FBI abuses.
With all due respect to the president, I believe that a pardon arrived at in secret and apparently in ignorance pales in comparison to the jury verdict arrived at after 8 weeks of trial in a court of law.
Right after the trial, one juror said that the guilty verdict was based on evidence that defendants Felt and Miller had acted without proper authority. Today, a White House spokesman said that President Reagan felt that the jury's decision was incorrect. Later, the spokesman added that the president was not passing judgment on the verdict, only exercising his prerogative to grant clemency. Robert Shackney, CBS News, Washington.
Every new Washington administration since the mid-1960s has lamented the rise of violent crime in American life and promised to do something about it. The Reagan administration is proving to be no exception. Attorney General William French Smith today convened in Washington yet another task force on violent crime and promised that fighting such crime will be the president's highest law enforcement priority. Fred Graham has more.
Nobody denied that fighting violent crime is good politics.
A recent poll showed that people in this country would rather have money spent dealing with violent crime and serious crime more so than on any other subject matter, including defense.
The Reagan administration's problem is that it has already earmarked billions more for foreign defense, but less than previous years to fight domestic crime. Another problem is that President Reagan will have no part of gun control. So the new task force started out with its options narrowed and then was told that the FBI feels that violent crime is not basically its job.
We cannot just simply help because we have the expertise. There is, as you point out, often a quick citizen call to bring in the FBI, and while that's very complimentary, it exceeds our jurisdiction, it erodes the relationships that we have with state and local law enforcement and really undermines state and local law enforcement.
The best suggestion seemed to be to somehow do more to fight the drug traffic.
Dealing with the opiate problem is an important way to make an impact on crime in the United States because, one, addicts do commit a sizable amount of crime in support of their addiction. Moreover, since they belong to a subculture that interacts with organized crime, the result is that their large amount of crime tends to breed more and violent crime.
This will be the third major federal task force to study crime since 1967. Meanwhile, the number of reported serious crimes has increased by more than 300%. Fred Graham, CBS News, Washington.
President Reagan, slowly recovering from the attempt on his life, is said to be taking personal control now of the fight for his economic belt-tightening program. More on that from Leslie Stahl at the White House.
The President and Mrs. Reagan went for a walk through the tulips in the White House Rose Garden today, his first venture out in the fresh air since he came home from the hospital last Saturday. Inside the White House, officials were taking exception to news reports of a congressional budget study showing that 51% of poor families will lose income if President Reagan's budget cuts are passed. Budget Director David Stockman came before cameras to put a more positive interpretation on the study, saying only 4% of the families will suffer a serious or even modest impact. He was asked whether the so-called safety net programs, particularly Social Security, are still considered untouchable.
We have said that Social Security, in terms of retirement benefits and in terms of prompt cost of living adjustments, is and will be a protected item. But obviously, we did not say that the entire Social Security system, with the whole array of benefits, and many of them non-retirement benefits that it provides, would be exempt from scrutiny.
White House officials say at least 3 Social Security changes are being studied. 1, the possibility of reducing benefits to those who retire before age 65. 2, changing the cost of living formula. And 3, making Social Security universal by including government employees in the system. Officials stress that no decisions have been made and that no proposals will be sent to Congress for months. Leslie Stahl, CBS News, the White House.
The President also met at the White House today with Secretary of State Haig and NATO Secretary General Joseph Luns of the Netherlands. the first person outside the president's personal or official family to see Mr. Reagan during his recuperation at the White House. Lund said he was, quote, astonished at Mr. Reagan's vitality. Later, Haig said the United States plans an announcement on the possibility of new talks with Moscow about limiting medium-range nuclear missiles in Europe. 5 persons were arrested at the State Department today outside Mr. Haig's 7th floor office after they threw a red liquid and ashes on the floor to protest U.S. military involvement in El Salvador. The State Department said what it called the incident is under investigation.
Polident presents Martha Ray, movie star, denture wearer.
Folks, I've used Polident for years, but now there's something that cleans my dentures even better. It's fantastic. New Extra Strength Polident. Watch it work on this tough lab stain. New Extra Strength Polident has 50% more of a special stain remover. 50% more. Gets those stains clean, even in between. So take it from a big mouth. New Polident Green gets tough stains clean with extra strength.
How long does a John Deere lawn tractor last? 10 or 15 years is not unusual, which means with ordinary use, you could mow a path from New York, across Pennsylvania, through Indiana, Missouri, Kansas, Colorado, Utah, all the way to the West Coast. Imagine mowing clear across America. Just think how many times you could mow your lawn. John Deere, you may pay a little more, but they'll last.
The Reagan administration said today it is discussing with Saudi Arabia the sale of 10,000 anti-tank missiles and an undisclosed number of ground radar stations. Officials said this military hardware is defensive and that the Saudis already have some of the radar equipment and 5,000 of the missiles. Israeli forces were busy inside southern Lebanon today. Frogmen blew up a cargo ship in the port of Sidon, and Israeli jets bombed, strafed, and rocketed suspected Palestinian guerrilla bases a dozen miles north of the border. Israeli soldiers also crossed into Lebanon, pursuing 2 Palestinian guerrillas who tried an unusual way to get into Israel. Bob Simon has that story.
There were a couple of 17-year-old kids, said one Israeli soldier. They were also members of a small radical PLO group with headquarters in Damascus. It was the 3rd time in less than a year that members of this group had tried to circumvent Israel's tightly sealed border with Lebanon and the carefully patrolled coastline by using airborne contraptions. This one was a balloon. It was launched 13 miles inside Lebanon. It was spotted and shot down by Israeli border anti-aircraft gunners at 4:30 this morning. The terrorists survived the crash, but were killed in a firefight with Israeli soldiers inside Lebanon. According to documents found on the bodies, the men wanted to seize Israeli hostages and obtain the release of their 2 comrades, now prisoners in Israel, who tried to cross the border in motorized hang gliders 5 weeks ago. The balloon was carrying American and Soviet-made automatic weapons as well as hand grenades. The men might have been aiming for Kiryat Shmona, an Israeli border town where almost everyone was shopping today in anticipation of the Passover holiday, which begins on Saturday. So far, we've gotten these kamikazes in time, said one Israeli military source tonight. But if they ever get to open fire from the air, he said, these balloons won't look funny at all. Bob Simon, CBS News, Tel Aviv.
In Ajaccio, Corsica today, 2 time bombs exploded in the airport terminal just minutes after a plane carrying French President Giscard d'Estaing landed. 8 persons in the building were injured, one of them critically. Giscard d'Estaing, whose plane was some distance from where the bombs exploded, was on a 1-day campaign swing through the French Mediterranean island. No group claimed responsibility for the bombs. 25 leftist terrorists in jails across West Germany ended a 10-week hunger strike today. Their fast ended several hours after the death in a Hamburg prison of 38-year-old Sigurd de Boos, the first of those to go on the hunger strike. He died of starvation. The terrorists had been demanding that they be detained together and be treated as political prisoners. The prisoners said that they won their cause, but West Germany declined comment. When the boat people and other refugees came here from Vietnam, some of the fishermen among them were resettled on the Gulf Coast of Texas. The idea was that the climate and the setting would be ideal. For at least one group, it has been anything but ideal. Today, that group filed suit in federal court, asking for protection from the Ku Klux Klan. Steve Croft reports.
The suit, filed today in Houston, is believed to be the first antitrust action ever filed against the Ku Klux Klan. The Vietnamese claim that the Klan and a local fishermen's group have conspired to keep them from fishing the waters of Galveston Bay through a campaign of violence and intimidation.
The Vietnamese came to this country seeking a land of freedom where we could raise our family in peace.
Since Colonel Nguyen Van Nam and several hundred Vietnamese moved to Seabrook, Texas, they've had nothing but trouble. 3 of their boats have been burned, and the Ku Klux Klan has held several rallies in which effigies of Vietnamese boats have been set ablaze.
Mr. Beam, the Grand Dragon of the Texas Ku Klux Klan, has issued an ultimatum, and that is that if the fishermen are not out, the Vietnamese fishermen are not out of Galveston Bay by the 15th of May, the date shrimping season opens, he will take matters in his own hands.
51 Vietnamese boats are now for sale, but there have been no buyers. The Vietnamese say they plan to stay and fish at least through this season, and they're asking the federal government for an injunction that will guarantee their rights.
He left his rights behind him in Vietnam, and he's over here now taking my rights away from me and my friends. And I'm going to fight it.
Gene Fisher, president of the Seabrook-Kemah Fishermen's Coalition, maintains that the Vietnamese are the ones that are violating the law by not obeying fishing regulations. Fisher and the Klan are making no promises.
Texas citizens will not yield their birthright, their jobs, and their livelihood without a fight. Period.
The Grand Dragon would not say how the Klan plans to fight. He says he would like to avoid violence, but would not rule it out.
The Vietnamese are hoping it won't come to that. They are counting on the federal government to prevent violence, even if it means sending in federal marshals to protect them. Steve Croft, CBS News, Houston.
Hello, I'm Charlie McKee for Electrolux. And this is an America that used to be. A time when companies brought vacuum cleaners to your home, because that's the best place to judge a vacuum. Today, few companies do that. But Electrolux still does, because your home is still the best place to see why Electrolux is better. So open your door to Electrolux. Electrolux, your home is the best place to see why we're better.
Ooh. Got tough congestion? Sinex is the long-acting nasal spray that can give you a second of and 10 hours of instantly. Medicated Vicks vapors penetrate your nose with a powerful feeling of relief. And Sinex decongesting medicine shrinks swollen nasal membrane so air can flow through. You breathe free up to 10 full hours. For tough congestion, get the Sinex extra feeling of relief. A second of 10 hours of
It attracted little attention when the government announced a week ago that it planned to buy about 5 million pounds of cobalt and sell all its surplus silver. But there's quite a story behind that, and Martha Teichner in London tells why a lot of people these days are buying cobalt and selling silver.
This is chromium, mined in South Africa, destined to become part of the automobiles, the surgical instruments, the armaments of the West.
Alloys for steel, especially.
It has already become part of a new sales pitch to investors. Buy strategic metals.
Strategic materials are more important to us than precious metals, securities, or any alternative investment form.
Would-be buyers by the hundreds crowd investment seminars to hear former gold bugs say that strategic metals will be the gold and silver of the 80s. $5 will buy a Texas millionaire's advice on how to get rich with strategic metals. Bache, the big investment firm, has become the first brokerage house to sell the metals to private buyers. What early investors are banking on is that American technology in the space age cannot survive without strategics. They are a group of more than 20 metals absolutely vital to industry and defense. They have exotic names: germanium, molybdenum, tantalum. And they come from exotic places, often unstable nations in Africa. Typical examples of U.S. dependency. Chromium. The United States imports 91% of its supply, half of that from South Africa. Cobalt for jet engines. The United States imports 93% of its supply, largely from Zambia and Zaire. Spring 1978, a rebel uprising closed Zaire's major cobalt mine. Cobalt prices quadrupled, and the Soviet Union, which had just bought large amounts of the metal, cashed in. Wall Street got excited, and Washington got worried that strategic metals had become the prize in what's being called the resource war.
Resource war is what the Soviet Union has instituted to try and control the critical and strategic mineral resources of the globe. We have seen the presence of Cuban troops, the presence of Russian arms, the presence of considerable Russian political influence in the area on which we hope to get in the future these strategic minerals.
London, for centuries, has been the world's metal trading capital, and brokers here say the heightened interest in the strategic metals is fueled by fear, not fact.
In fact, these countries have the problem that they can't sell enough to the West, so there can hardly be a resource war going on at the present time.
I think that when the only reason for suggested for buying these metals is that the Russians are going to grab them any minute, is certainly going to lead to some very poor investments being made.
Nevertheless, Americans with lots of money to spend are buying strategics, until recently almost the private domain of the governments and industry that use the metals. Buyers take title to drums or bags of a substance, often stored in Rotterdam's bonded Freeport warehouses under tight security. CBS News was allowed to photograph these metals only with the permission of the owner, as samples were being taken that later would be tested for purity. Everyone agrees this is not a game for the small investor. Strategic metals are bought and sold by a handful of traders in the world, most of them in London. There is no formal marketplace, no regulation whatsoever, nothing to prevent manipulation of the market, and no guarantee that prices will go up.
In spite of warnings to buy cautiously, investors are betting that inflation, increased defense spending, and a resource war, if there is one, will indeed make them rich. Martha Teichner, CBS News, London.
The question tonight in Yonkers, New York, the state's fourth largest city, is not who is on strike, but who isn't. Yonkers firefighters went on strike yesterday in a contract dispute, and today they were joined on the picket line by sanitation workers, public works employees, and all police officers above the rank of patrolman. City officials have asked that the National Guard be sent in. Volunteers from neighboring towns responded to fire calls last night, but left after scuffles with striking firefighters. No one has been hurt so far in a fire. Well, the Commerce Department said today that housing starts in March rose 5 8/10 over February's, a statistic that left building industry leaders decidedly unenthusiastic. The president of the National Association of Home Builders, Herman J. Smith, predicted 300,000 more workers will join the 600,000 already laid off in construction and related trades. Michael Sumercrest, the chief economist of the Home Builders Group, said 95% of American families simply cannot afford $60,000 mortgages at today's interest rates. The stock market was up today.
I've done a lot of painting in my time. It's my job. But most people don't paint any more than they have to. That's okay. Just remember, when you do, use a top quality paint, like Pittsburgh Paint's Sunproof House Paint or Wallhide Interior Latex. See, to me, this is not just a can of paint. It's my reputation. And while it may not be your reputation, it is your home.
Pittsburgh Paint's Wallhide on sale now at participating dealers.
Real old-fashioned coffee aroma.
Old-fashioned? Mom, this is new improved mellow roast.
New? But it smells just like the coffee my mother used to make.
That's because new mellow roast has more rich aroma than before and a new full-bodied taste.
But smooth tasting like my mother's.
You like new mellow roast, huh, Mom?
New for you, dear. For me, just plain old-fashioned delicious.
New Mellow Roast coffee and grain beverage. Improved for even more old-fashioned coffee taste and aroma.
Now, if someone asked you what a cow magnet is, you'd probably think you were about to be the butt of some joke. But cow magnets do exist, and some folks in Texas swear that they're just as good for car mileage as for cow milking. If you're totally confused now, maybe David Dick can clear things up.
Willie Hoff of Windhorst, Texas, has got some of the most contented cows you just about ever want to meet up with. And one of the ways he keeps them happy is to make sure they have magnets in their stomachs. Cow magnets. Willie believes, as do other farmers and veterinarians, if you put a $4.50 magnet in a cow's stomach, it'll stay there as long as she lives, and it'll hold any sharp pieces of metal which she may accidentally swallow, keeping them from puncturing her insides. H.C. Lyles, who lives near Lake Kickapoo, uses cow magnets, but not for his cows. He's got them in his pickup truck, because Mr. Lyles believes strapping 2 cow magnets to opposite sides of the fuel line leading into the carburetor gives him better mileage by somehow altering the molecules in the gasoline.
It's just one of them experiments. In other words, just like tying another knot in a rope. Well, it may hold and may not. If it won't work in the truck, well, I can go to the cows with it, and it'll work there. We know that.
In fact, so many people have become attracted to cow magnets, a fellow like Cotton Flat, who runs a farm supply store in Wichita Falls, can't keep enough on hand for the cows and the cars.
I sell them as cow magnets. And what the people do with them after they get them is strictly, up to them.
Down at Texas A&M, where they're supposed to know a thing or two about agriculture and engineering, the professors say magnets may be all right for cows, but they won't do a blessed thing for cars.
What I would suggest is that someone like Consumers Union ought to test this, because that's their business of trying to debug hoaxes.
So there you have it. The average man, desperate for some kind of relief from high fuel costs, willing to try almost anything, even cow magnets, while most qualified experts say it's a waste of time and money. Keep cow magnets in cows where they belong. David Dick, CBS News, Windhorst, Texas.
Well, most qualified experts say that's our report for this Thursday. Until tomorrow, Dan Rather, CBS News, New York. Good night.
Maintaining your car, your boat, and your home just isn't enough these days. You need a maintenance program for your insurance, too. So look in the yellow pages for the professional who can give all your insurance a complete checkup. Your independent Safeco agent will make sure your coverage is in the pink. And chances are, trim costs, too. With Safeco, insurance for careful people.
How are we coming, dear?
Just fine. Darn these hands.
Your minor arthritis pain is acting up. What this pain needs is Bayer aspirin, 100% pure pain reliever, 100% pure aspirin. And remember, for arthritis pain, doctors recommend aspirin 4-to-1 over any other non-prescription medication.
Honey, you look terrific.
For hours of relief, Bayer aspirin, 100% pure pain reliever for arthritis pain.
This has been the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather.
The ceiling of the Sistine Chapel dingy with age. A Good Friday look at efforts to restore the beauty of Michelangelo's creation tomorrow on Morning.
This is CBS.
South Central Bell is asking for a major rate restructuring that will cost you more. And the tornado warning is over for our area, but heavy thunderstorms continue. The story is coming up next on Eyewitness News.
Easter's almost here, and at Winn-Dixie, you'll find dozens of ways to save.
For instance, Super Brand Grade A large white eggs are just 79 cents a dozen.
And you can buy a 15 to 20 pound hickory smoked whole ham for 79 cents a pound.
Save on Thrifty Made sugar, too. It's a Winn-Dixie special at $1.79.